So, Chris, good to have you on the show today. Let's kick off generally with your view on the equity market right now, because we're very much focused on the earnings front. Earlier in the week, we've seen tech stocks rallying on the back of that, but the market mood appears to have soured somewhat today.
No, I think quite clearly Europe is looking like it wants to implode. You know, before, when the yields sort of knocked on 7%, there were at least ministers' meetings and that kind of thing. There's not much on the horizon, other than we know that the regions in Spain are in trouble. Valencia asking for a bailout, or preparing to ask for a bailout. Greek debt not acceptable as collateral. These are very, very serious moves, and we know that in Spain there are more regions that will be coming cap in hand at some stage for bailouts. And basically the Spanish government's cupboard is actually bare. So it's not just the yield going above 7% that's significant, and how strongly it's gone up 7%.
Yeah.
It's how far that the stock market's falling almost 6% at the moment, and still weakening into that close, with the Italian markets following very, very close behind, with also major ructions. It's interesting also to see the French market. You know, when you've got the bonds and the equity selling off, as you're seeing in Spain, that's what I call the distressed trade. You're seeing that same pattern in France. The yields were stronger earlier in the day. In other words, they were slightly down. Now you're seeing French yields tick up as well, with their stock market down. That's not a positive sign.
Chris, how strongly correlated is the movement on our markets to US markets and European markets right now?
The correlation is actually quite strong in one sense. The rand is the thing that's been doing most of the heavy lifting as far as shielding the local market from a lot of the volatility. At the moment, the volatility on the local market is actually down quite a bit, and is at lower levels than the US market, for instance, and some of the European markets.
Yeah.
And that does suggest, you know, obviously if you took it in dollar terms, it would be higher. But the rand's volatility is basically, or the market has been shielded by the rand at the moment. As I say, the rand weakening quite a bit today, and that's not because of the interest rate cut. Funny enough, it's because of what's happening in Europe. We're starting to see that distressed liquidation taking place in the rand market, and you know, we just need to wait for things to settle down, and the rand will strengthen. I also concur with the RMB analysts that we'll probably see rand strength towards the end of the year.
You're looking at further rate cuts right now. Just following you on Twitter, you know, we had that 50 basis points yesterday. How much more are we going to see this year if you're looking for more cuts?
Now, I think we'll see another 50 basis point cut in the fourth quarter this year, and another one in the first quarter next year. That'll take the repo rate right down to 4%. In other words, 250 basis points moves. And the reason is that there's still more, the global financial system hasn't stabilized at all. In Europe, I think it's still unstable and deteriorating. And for that reason, these problems are not going to go away. And so I would expect the central bank to be, you know, true to form, acting to actually try and shield the local economy from the problems that we're actually facing offshore. So
being proactive there. Chris, hold on for us. We've got Cobus Null, mining analyst at Stanlib, joining in on the conversation to analyze the resource sector, because a lot of news out of the resource sector to unpack today. Cobus, thank you so much for joining us. Let me just firstly get your view on the management shakeup that we've had at Anglo American. Of course, Neville Nicolai resigning with immediate effect, and Chris Griffith from Kumba Iron Ore will step in to be the CEO. Actually, speaking to him today, he was surprised by some commentary in the media saying that Anglo is cracking the whip on its SA operations. He thought that wasn't a true reflection of what's going on. But what are your thoughts on what's happened here?
Now, look, I mean, it's, you know, I guess it's a change that sort of wasn't totally unexpected, you know. And it's you know, if you look at all the movements in the three divisions and companies, it's sort of been, you know, people that's been within the Anglo Group for years, you know, some more than others. I mean, if you look at Chris Griffith, he's been with Amplats before for about 18 years before he actually moved over to Kumba. So it is, you know, it's obviously a change, and I don't think one can sort of expect magic to happen. I think Chris's track record at Kumba has been fairly clean. But underground platinum mining, I would argue, is a lot more complex than open cast iron ore mining. So one will see how this one plays out.
Yeah, and he did say today he moves over to the platinum sector with trepidation, and because of course we know how things are tough in the platinum sector right now. Anglo-American results. What do you think of the Amplats division and the numbers we saw from that end?
Yeah, look, I mean, it probably was not as bad from maybe from a production level and sort of a sales level as maybe as the market expected. But I think that the big thing to watch here is the cost. When they do report on this coming Monday, if one sort of imply back what the cost must have done to sort of give the earnings numbers that they've reported or that they guided to, sort of speaks towards quite substantial cost increases. And there's also potential that one may see sort of a decline in grades at certain areas, even some areas where they've shown very good results, like the Mogalakwena mine, which is the open cast mine, that one may see more negative numbers actually coming through in terms of grades. So I think it may be more down to the detail on Monday to really make a full comment on this.
Yeah, and just Kumba Iron Ore, your views on those numbers today, because profits falling back whilst we still have production increasing as a result of Kolomela. We're still seeing hefty margins there, but margins are coming under pressure now, sitting at 57%. Your views on the stock price at this point?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a company, if we start off, with its results, it's obviously been a record export iron ore volume for them, and I guess at the moment, even though we've seen, a lot of cost pressures given the increased waste stripping that they're undergoing at the moment, and with a 21% lower dollar iron ore price sort of realized over the period, margins still look fairly good, and I guess it sort of explains the quality of the assets, sort of, where it sits relative maybe to other global assets. The share price is obviously, I think, at the moment driven more by a yield story opposed to maybe some other longer-term fundamental drivers. And there's a lot of, in a low-yield environment we're currently living in, I think there's a lot of people that are interested in a stock that pays 8+% dividend yields.
Yep.
And I think the stock is obviously getting a lot of support from that. Also, interestingly, to see Anglos that have actually increased their stake in effectively in Sishen Iron Ore to 70% from about 65%, where they sort of exercise the option which they will obtain, and the strike price sort of being about 8% lower than what the current market price is. And I guess that speaks towards Anglo-Americans' confidence in this company.
Yeah, that is interesting. Cobus Null, thank you so much for joining us today. Cobus Null from Stanlib. Back to Chris Hart in our Cape Town studios. Chris, rather, that is what Cobus had to say about the numbers coming through. Interesting that Anglo-American has increased its stake in Kumba Iron Ore right now.
No, exactly. I think we need to appreciate that Anglo, since the proposed takeover by earlier, I think has shaken the group. It's no longer a complacent place to work. I think if you're at the top, they are actually exercising quite a lot of pressure to actually achieve performance. And Anglo has got such excellent assets. And I suspect that what's going to be happening is there's going to be an unlock in terms of, if you take the ultra long term, the slowdown that you're seeing even in emerging markets, etc., will eventually turn around. I think you're going to see an issue where when the global economy starts turning up again, you will still see that the resource production is going to be constrained, or the resource area. There's not a lot of enormous amount of new production that's going to be coming into play. And so even if there's a shorter term downturn, these assets are eventually going to perform.
Yep.
I mean, the platinum assets, you can just see, in my opinion, the classic signs of a market that's approaching a bottom, where you're starting to see some consolidation, shutdown, demand or supply destruction taking place. Platinum is one of these commodities that has got a really very strong future in front of it. And of course, this is where the major source of platinum comes from in the world. And I think Anglos is in a very strong position to exploit that. Unfortunately, the division hasn't performed that well, for a variety of reasons. But I think at some stage, there will be some value unlock in that section.
Chris, if you had to get exposure to specifically a platinum miner, Impala Platinum at almost 130 Rand, it was down 3% today, interestingly enough. And then Anglo Plat sitting at 423 Rand 50. Which of the two stocks are most attractive to you? Which one do you like the best?
Well, the first point in principle is I like the big three in the platinum area, from an investment point of view. In other words, the others, you start falling quite rapidly down the quality chain. So whether it's Lonmin Implats or Anglo Plat is where I'd concentrate. I suspect Anglo Plat is starting to get to a point where it's going to start being attractive. At this stage, I'd favour Impala just a little bit over Anglo Plat, but I think over the longer term, Anglo Plat does have actually the better quality reserves.